incredible meal. Many thanks to Mike again. I was going to be up here talking before I ate, so we have to rely a little bit more on notes, I think, now. All right, ladies and gentlemen, good evening. My name is Troy Chudzik. I'm a Mass Corporal currently serving with the Canadian Forces Postal Unit based out of 8 Wing, Trenton. I've been in the military now for just a slight over bit of 20 years. In those 20 years, I've seen a lot of things. I've had several tours, one to Bosnia in 2001, before that to Cyprus in 1991. More recently, I came back from Afghanistan just last year. I'm also a father. I have 2 amazing young teenage daughters, one of which is with me tonight, which I very much appreciate for her coming. The other one, unfortunately, a little older, she's got a full-time job and everything else. So thank you very much for coming, sweetie. Certainly my privilege and honor to be here this evening. This is a cause which words can't even describe. It's an amazing thing what our fellow Canadians are doing overseas. And that's what I'm here to talk about tonight. A little bit about my experiences overseas, mostly in Afghanistan. I'd like to share a story of courage and strength, a story of hope and faith. Through the Canadian military's involvement in the mission in Afghanistan, Canadian soldiers have been faced with some of the most difficult challenges we've ever faced. It's been many years since our troops faced such difficult hostilities and been so active participants in an armed conflict as we're facing there right now. We've always trained for the worst and we've always hoped for the best. Afghanistan changed all that, and we lost our first soldier in Afghanistan in 2002 with the death of Private Nathan Smith. We've since named the camp after Nathan Smith, and we're presently using that for the provincial reconstruction team over there. Those are the people that are doing all of the fantastic things for the country. So it's duly fitting. I was tasked and trained to go to Afghanistan in July of 2007. This meant an undergoing of 7 months of training in Edmonton, Alberta, followed by 7 months of deployment overseas. In all, asked to give over a year of my life to this mission, most of which would be spent far away from my home and family. As with any soldier, I eagerly accepted the opportunity with pride, and for the next 7 months, I was off on my way to Edmonton, Alberta for training. My arrival in Kandahar Airfield on the 23rd of February of 2008 brought to light what I was to expect for the next half a year of my life. 40 minutes prior to our landing onto the airfield, we heard a voice come over the speaker system telling us to gear up. This meant getting to the business of putting on about 50 pounds of gear, flak vests, helmets, and making sure all of our last-minute equipment checks were ready to go. 30 minutes prior to landing into the field, interior lights of the combat aircraft were turned off. We're masking our darkness of the flight and our landing into the hostile country. Some of the longest moments of my life. Flying complete darkness, about to land in the country where many of my comrades had come home in caskets. I remember sitting there and wondering how I could hear my breathing over the roaring of the airplane engines. We landed about 11 o'clock local time PM and loaded onto several buses, and we were right off to the rifle range to get our weapons in good working order. I remember sitting there thinking, it's 11, almost 12 o'clock at night, we've been flying for over 24 hours to get into this country, and here we are in a live weapons range firing our weapons. It really set a focus of where we are and what was happening to us at that time, and what we had to go through. By this time we've gotten there, it's been over a month since we've lost any Canadian casualties in the country. About a week later, that all changed. 2nd of March, excuse me, 2nd of March, Camp White notice came out stating we were now in a communications blackout and we couldn't call home at all. It was an eerie feeling, the first casualty we'd had since we'd arrived. We're now facing our first Canadian casualty on our tour, a young 25-year-old soldier from Edmonton, Alberta. We were told that night we were to be on the runway to send our fallen comrade home. That evening, about 80 Canadian soldiers lined up on the airfield behind the ramp of an aircraft as the coffin was carried forward to the plane. Our padre spoke words of duty and honor, and I remember feeling immense proudness. We were sending our soldier, who I've never met, we were sending him home to his family and to his friends, and back home to his country. He believed he was doing the right thing, and I felt very proud for that. There I stood and grieved with all my fellow comrades. We didn't see another casualty for about 11 days. Another young soldier, age 22, and it was a similar experience, a feeling of enormous proudness. We were again turning another Canadian soldier back home. Less than a week later, March 16th, we lost yet another soldier. Sergeant Jason Boyles, who was 32 years old, was a native of the local Napanee area. The beginning of everything that happened in the ramp ceremony was similar to the other two I'd attended up until this point, except for the fact that there was a lot more people that were there at this time. We were over 140 at least. The padre began the eulogy as he'd done before, and the words spoken with me remain with me to this day. Jason loved his job. He loved the military, and his fellow soldiers loved him back. His world was his 2-year-old daughter, Mackenzie, his wife Allison, his dogs, and his family. This is the first time I'd heard mention of a child in the Padre's eulogies. There was something deep inside of me that these words invoked. I got a lump in my throat, and the tears started rolling down my eyes. To lose a soldier was one thing. We almost expected that it could and it would happen. But the thought of a small 2-year-old child who would never have daddy's arms around her again, it was one of the most painful things I'd ever experienced. A young child who would never look at daddy's eyes again. There was some comfort in the closeness of knowing that after the ramp ceremony, we had so many soldiers there together, and we bonded, we went and we talked, and we discussed what would happen. Throughout my time in Afghanistan, I attended 12 more ramp ceremonies before my return home. Some were similar to the first two I had experienced, young soldiers, and a feeling of proudness. Some were older, some had families, some were married, and some had children. The more difficult ones were always the ones that had children. Being a father, I could definitely feel the loss. And I remember thinking, what if? What if that was me? As each ramp ceremony came and went, I couldn't help but notice more and more soldiers attended. The last ramp ceremony I attended in Afghanistan had more soldiers than I could count. We had soldiers from all nations, not just Canadians. We had Americans, Australians, British, French, Dutch. And it seemed that every time we lost one of our fallen, that more and more people were there to pay their respects. Through this time, we all grieved in our own way, but we also bonded more closely together. We leaned on each other to draw strength to continue with our mission. The hardest was always the sadness for the children and for the loss of those children. Also, throughout the time that I spent in Afghanistan, I have many friends that I kept in contact with back home, one of which is from Fort Hope, Ontario. I had one of my friends send me some pictures she'd taken of Highway 401 processions as they pass on their way from Trenton to Toronto. Pictures show hundreds of people lining the highway to pay their respects to fallen soldiers as they pass by. I and my comrades overseas found great strength from this, to know the people of this country I serve supported us on so many levels, or on such a level of compassion. Highway 401 is aptly named the Highway of Heroes. What we as Canadians often do not hear about in the media is the families of the fallen soldiers, the people I call my silent heroes. The ones behind the scenes while we're off in faraway lands carrying out our duties. Since my return from Afghanistan in September of 2008, I paid my own respects to the fallen being returned along the Highway of Heroes. I've stood and saluted the processions as it passed en route to Toronto. In some of these, I've seen young children riding in limousines and felt sad at the loss of a child's parent. I've stood side by side with many of my comrades and drawn strength in our numbers, which are constantly increasing. I've also drawn strength from the increasing support from my fellow Canadians. I believe there is strength in numbers. So with that, I ask you to continue supporting our troops, the heroes. Continue supporting our fallen, lest we forget. And support their families, our silent heroes. Again, I'd like to thank you for the opportunity for being able to come out this evening and talk to you. In reality, I could have not used some notes and probably stood up here for hours telling you about Afghanistan and what happens there. It's a different world. It's not one when you come back you want to remember. Some good things happen there. I met some fantastic people who are doing a fantastic job over there. I believe in what we're doing over there. But there's pain that comes with doing that. So it's at a price. And unfortunately, sometimes that price lies on our silent heroes, the children. With that, I'd like to leave you with a video, a song written by one of our fellow Canadian soldiers who wrote this before we actually deployed overseas. Hopefully the sound quality is good enough that you can hear it, but it's a beautiful song. So we're kind of Can you grab the lights? Give me back the mic.
I just want to watch the video.
General says digging deep, and there's hell coming from the sky. Just one thought to remember, how your family's doing tonight. Johnny sails loves her as he closes his eyes. Sarah cries for mother on the field where she lies. Did it for the nation, so we don't have to hide. So on this cold, lonely evening, you don't have to cry. Waiting by the telephone, there's a scared and worried wife. Said he'd be home soon, just before he kissed his children goodbye. A quiet knock at the front door, and tears came to her eyes. So sad to lose another, her little girl will be in her dreams tonight. They did it for the nation, and so we don't have to hide. So on this cold, lonely evening, you don't have to cry. Before you say goodnight to your loved one, please keep in mind the bed you tuck them in is the bed a soldier left behind. They did it for the nation, so we don't have to hide. So on this cold, lonely evening, you don't have to cry. They did it for the nation, so we don't have to hide. So on this cold, lonely evening, you don't have to cry. No, you don't have to cry. And we don't have to hide.